People are
I,
losing 140,000 cash, first time buyers. These are not speculators. These are first time buyers, like
I
young
saw that.
millennials trying to start their lives, and they lose 140,000. Like it's like the worst nightmare you could ever believe. And what do they say? We're relieved.
You know, I somebody sent that me, John, and I couldn't believe that. I was like, are they paid actors? Like, what is going on here? Because who on earth loses that kind of money? I mean, it doesn't matter how rich you are, that's still a substantial amount of money. All right, ladies and gentlemen, so I've got a great stream coming for you now. It's Jon Flynn of Flynn Real Estate. I'm going to shoot over to his YouTube channel. Check this guy out. He is fantastic. We're going to have a talk about real estate. We're going to talk about everything to do with the Canadian housing market, what's going on, what do we think is going to happen moving forward. And John, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on here and chatting with me.
Hey, thanks, Luke. Big fan. Watch your videos almost every day whenever you release them. And yeah, it's a pleasure to be on here and we can chat about real estate.
Thank you, man. And yeah, I watch your channel all the time as well. You provide some great content. And as we were just saying before we got live here, you know, you're one of the only guys that I know of in Canadian real estate who actually works within real estate, who is actually calling a spade instead of trying to pump the market or questioning a crash. And that's my first question, really. You know, I've seen a lot of people on YouTube, and you're not in the GTA, which I think is great because you're going to give us a different perspective. I feel like realtors in the GTA, they're in their own sort of bubble there compared to the rest of the country. But a lot of people are questioning, are we even in a real estate crash, even though we're seeing places decline, you know, over 40%. You put out on your Twitter all the time great statistics. So what do you think? Do you think we're in a real estate crash right now?
I think definitely we're in a real estate crash. We've been in one since February of 2022. Or I just put out a thing on Twitter, a chart on Twitter yesterday. Okay, so what I put out yesterday was the number of mortgage arrears by month in Canada, and this is from the Central Bankers Association, and this is with 11 of the banks. You know, all the big banks and like Equity Bank or Equitable Bank and whatever else, HSBC, etc. And we've seen our first month since February 2022 over 8,000 mortgages in arrears in Canada. Again, not a lot of mortgages in arrears. It's the first time since February. And of course, what happened in February, the first rate hike, as everybody probably knows from doing the little bit of research that you can do, it takes 18 to 24 months for interest rates to take effect. And this was just the first rate hike. So of course, now we're seeing that. We've seen these mortgage arrears come from their all-time lows, pop back up over a certain level. And if you look at the percentage too, the percentage, it bottomed out at about 0.14%, and it's up to 0.15, and now it just went up to 0.16. So it's, again, still very, very low near the bottom, but we are seeing that, or those interest rates start to take effect, and they're right on time, right? I put on my post, like, this is like right on time. Previously, were we in a real estate crash? I would say yes and no. Yes, because it was part of the cycle. Things maxed out, interest rates went up, and of course, prices come down. That was just the blow off top. This now is the time when we're getting into the actual crash.
Yeah, and you know, you're totally right to look at mortgages in arrears as well, because that being at a bottom right now, I mean, I've studied, and probably you've seen it as well, like when the US arrears started to happen for mortgages, people started defaulting on their mortgages, like it was really between 6 to 8 months period of time. Like it wasn't a massive amount of time that it took to go from all-time lows to all-time highs. And I think we're already seeing like the more subprime, like the insured mortgages, those people are already starting to get into a lot of trouble. And I've got contacts in the auto industry who tell me, both in the GTA and in Calgary, how the amount of auto repos happening right now is absolutely insane. Like they've never seen anything like this in their whole time running businesses in the auto industry in Canada, and some of them have been in the industry like before 2008, and people are going to default on their car, they're going to default on their credit card before they default on the home. The home's going to be the last thing, right?
Yeah, so my brother's involved in the car industry, and he's a dealership. Actually, I'm a little bit involved with him because I'm with big brother. And
Hmm.
yeah, I've been watching on the auction sites in Ontario here the number of repos, and they're from different. You kind of have to filter through because some of them are from like the big repo companies, and other ones are from the small lenders, just like mortgages, right? And
Yeah.
yeah, so during the pandemic and stuff, we were at all-time lows because of all the stimulus. But now we're seeing, big numbers. They're increasing just like the bank sales. The bank sales, again, they're not huge, but they're increasing every time I check them. I check them about every 3 weeks, and it's always like an increase up the next 20, 30, 40, 50 active listings. It doesn't look like a lot when I'm reporting these because these are active listings. So, of course, it doesn't show all the sold ones. On our system now, when someplace sells, they remove the owner's name, so I can't filter through seller's name.
Right.
That's why I don't report on the sales, or I haven't gone back to report on them, because you have to go through the whole different system and pull them one by one. It would take forever. But yeah, we are seeing the auto industry, and of course used car prices too, right? It's just like everything else during the pandemic. They skyrocketed to these all-time highs, people paying over asking, and now things are coming back to reality. Inventory sitting on dealers' lots, a lot harder to move them. Interest rates are high, people can't afford, so people will be fixing their old cars, not buying new ones at this point.
When I look at the real estate crash in '08, and I look at what's happening in the auto industry, and I look at what's happening in Canadian real estate as well, it all kind of fits together. Because I was talking to one of my friends in Calgary, and he was saying like some of the cars have dropped in price like 20-30%. We've seen real estate prices that went down nationally over 20% last year, and it did it within a short period of time. The same things happen with auto prices as well. At one point with the auto industry as well, there was a lack of supply, right? Everybody was saying, oh,
Mm-hmm.
there's no supply. The chips, it was all the chip shortage, and then that kind of abated, and then everything's kind of got better from that, and now there's been a flood of inventory. It's been a similar way in housing and real estate, not in the same way as there's been a flood of new homes coming onto the market, but inventory has gone up quite a bit, hasn't it?
Yeah, so the inventory, so we are at inventory levels that are like pre-pandemic at this point. And of course, there was not enough houses for everybody, which I disproved with the amount of completions and the increase in population over the last 10, 15. I did it multiple times, it doesn't matter. Now, of course, bringing in 1 million people, 500 permanent and 500 non-permanent residents a year, yes, we will have a problem at some point, but we actually had an excess of homes for people. Plus, that doesn't account for all the basement apartments that have been,
Yeah.
created illegally, that have never been registered. Like, they're not registered on the CMHC site when rent your basement out to, your whoever, right? Some college kids or whatever the case may be. And there's tons of those. Like, we're not talking, a few thousand. There's like thousands, like hundreds, probably hundreds of thousands of basement, non-registered illegal basement units. Now the inventory, I'd say, isn't an issue for if you're looking to buy a house. The affordability is an issue, but there's lots of inventory, and you can pick and choose whichever house you want as long as you're willing to pay these, again, inflated prices.
And I'm sure you've seen on Twitter, as have I, like some of the price cuts, some of the losses that people are taking are just astronomical. Are you seeing that in your area? Because you're like Niagara, St. Catharines, right?
Yeah, so here's a couple of examples. I don't give addresses because I'm not allowed to
For sure.
disclose things as a realtor. But just in the
Hmm.
last few days, from reporting back to my buyers that I'm working with, and there are still people buying, fully aware. My buyers and people. One thing I want to clear up: they say, "How do you sell any homes, John?" When you talk about the market like this. Well, my buyers are fully informed. They're fully aware of how I feel, and they know the risks going in. And a lot of
Hmm.
them, or most of them, have cash, and they're not taking their first mortgage and leveraging everything they have to buy a house. They've been in the market at some point. They have the cash, and maybe they took a break or whatnot, and they're getting back in. But so the one house was in Fawn Hill. It was 1.8 million, and after numerous price reductions, it just sold for 1,175,000. Now, was it worth 1.8 million? Maybe at the peak it was. It probably was at the peak, but of course they listed it too high. But they've had to reduce the price substantially. There was another one that I had shown on just around the corner from me. They were asking $1 million, under 998 or something. It was less than 2 months on the market from the start of the listing. We're not talking old listings where it was sitting on the market. This was freshly listed 2 months ago or less than 2 months ago for just under $1 million, and it just sold for 800. Again, it was getting shown at 900 and whatever thousand, 998,000. Like, I showed it, and my people were like, yeah, it's not the house for us, but we didn't really feel, given the current market, that it was significantly overpriced or anything. And it was listed, so they did reduce it to 900,000, and then they ended up taking 800,000 for an offer. So it's a big price difference for when you're going from 900 to 800 less than 2 months after you've listed the home. Another thing is there's a lot of this, let's wait until the spring, let's wait until the new year to list if we don't get our price. Well, that's fine for the people that can do that, but there's a lot of people, and I'm guessing those two instances I just told you about, they couldn't wait until the spring. So these guys probably had to sell. Maybe they bought something else, maybe they were building something and it was ready. They're going to set prices right now, not the people that say let's wait until the spring. And again, these sellers that are saying this, let's wait until the spring, it's a buyer's market right now. Maybe they're hoping it'll be a seller's market in the spring. The buyers are truly setting the price right now. And a lot of people say, well, buyers always set the price, which is kind of true. They do. When they want to overpay, they overpay, and when they want to underpay, they underpay. So yeah, right now it's not an option for people to wait. I guess I should say they have to sell now, and they're at the mercy of the buyers. And the buyers are the smart buyers with the savvy agents will know what when they're going to go in and lowball the prices. I don't want to say lowball the house, not a lowball when they're still inflated by 30-40% from what they should be.
Well, you're talking about St. Catharines?
So I'm talking about, so the Niagara region, which is St. Catharines, Niagara Falls, Fort Erie, Welland, all these places. There's 13 or so municipalities from Grimsby all the way to, right? So, but it's about 500,000 population in the whole greater area.
Because I just looked it up. The median average household income in St. Catharines is just $52,000. Like, what the... What the fuck is that? Like $800,000 for a house? Like that is insane. That's like 16 times income.
Well, that's what we've done, right? We've normalized this, right? We've normalized these prices. Well, I haven't, but the market has. There's no benefit for the average person to these prices. The only people that care about high prices are, investors, developers, speculators. The average person should not ever want high prices. Like when people came to me and they would say, oh, look, John, my house is worth this much. Can you believe it? And I'll say, that's not a good. What about when your kids want to buy a house? What about, when your grandkids want to buy a house? And then they think about it and they say, yeah, you're probably right. I said, well, what are you going to do? What are you going to do when you move? And you have to pay these prices, and it's just a big hassle. And then they generally agree, right? So again, it doesn't benefit the population. It benefits the corporations and the developers and the people that are making money. So everybody, I'd say, like the average person, the middle class, the families, the grandparents, the parents, they should all want or lower priced homes, unless they just bought in the last year or two. Well, I understand, but most people didn't just buy in the last year or two. Most people are existing homeowners, and one other thing that drives me nuts, and I finally just disproved it with data, was, and I hear these agents say it, well, you can be sure, or it's one of these things that, your house is, they can say, the rule of thumb is your house is going to double in price every 10 years, right? And it's just kind of, they're just throwing this around like, this is, you can just this is kind of just like common sense at this point. Your house price is going to double every 10 years. And again, it was just on my Twitter over the weekend, one of my charts where I disproved this in the Ontario area in the 20 boards surrounding the GTA. GTA data that I can get doesn't go back that far, or the way that they present it. For me, I'm a new member of the Toronto Real Estate Board, so there's two systems in there. It's very confusing. So I use the outside of the GTA data, which I built, and I had to go in and manually select this data, right? 6 of the last 27 years, these are the purchase years. So if you had bought any of these years from 1987 to 2013, this is how much your equity would have increased in 10 years or 10 years after this point, right? So of course, I can only go to 2013 because it's 2023 now. 6 of those 27 years included in this chart have doubled or more in price. So the majority have not. The average increase is 71.7%. The only reason those last 6 years in this chart have doubled is because of this mega bubble we've been in. And if you look back to the last bubble in the late 80s, so if you had a bought in 1987, 88, 89, 91, 92, you're looking at like a 4 to 18% increase. I think it went up to 30 maybe in 1992. But in those 5 years, from 87 to 91, you're looking at in 10 years, so this is 10 years after this is showing this data.
This video is powered by ExpressVPN, helping you get around the censorship laws in Canada. Go to expressvpn.com/market mania if you're interested in a VPN.
In 10 years, so this is 10 years after this is showing this data, your house would have increased 4 to 18% after 10 years, right? And so now anyone that bought in the last 5 years, you're going to be lucky to break even or get that 5 or 10% appreciation in the next 10 years. So don't believe when people tell you, especially when you buy it in a bubble. Like, so you're buying at like these all-time record-setting prices, and you think, and the realtor is going to tell you, don't worry, real estate always doubles in 10 years. Like, so first of all, you're gonna have paid off like 20,000 of your mortgage because you've been paying all interest, and your house price will have gone up like 10-20% if you're lucky, because you bought at the wrong time, right? Don't time the market, time in the market, all this BS, right? Well,
yeah,
they didn't say that. You don't hear people talking about don't time the market, don't ever try to time the market when prices are low.
Yeah,
so when prices are high, they come out with time in the market, right? Yeah, conveniently enough, right? BS, right? Don't buy the bubble, like don't buy the Bitcoin when it's 65,000 US or whatever, right? So those people still time in the market. Now, I'm not a Bitcoin expert, so yeah, it probably will go to 200,000 at one day. I don't know. I say time the market,
and there's good reason to that too, because when you're buying a home to live in that home, there's a lot more costs than just the home purchase. You've got property taxes, you've got insurance, you've got maintenance, you got all these different things. And then a lot of people, once they buy a home, they're spending most of their disposable income on shit for the house, whether it's new decor, painting it. Everybody, when they buy a home, they want to make it their own, like put your own stamp on it. That's what they kind of say. And it's all that money. I've always wondered, and there's no way to really calculate it, over 30 years of ownership, how much money are people putting into homes? Because homes are a depreciating asset, really, when you think about it. Because if you do nothing to the home and hold it for 30 years, unless you're in a real estate bubble like we've been in, you're not really going to see any appreciation. You've got to maintain that home. You can't just leave it, especially the way they build houses in Canada and the United States. It's just like almost disposable houses. Like, the roofs, they need to be replaced after a certain amount of time. I mean, in Calgary, the roofs last like 5 years, if that, because of the hailstorms. And you're paying like $300-400 a month in terms of property insurance. So there's all these other expenses, I think, that people kind of avoid talking about, that are more correlated to the real inflation rate versus like the fake numbers that the government is putting out, the CPI. And I think people forget that, because that is such a large cost. And I'd love to know, I bet people spend hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars on the home over like the 20 to 30 years of home ownership.
Oh yeah, it's a good question. I'd like to know too. And I could come up with some estimates just in where I've been and what I've spent. And especially nowadays with the younger generation buying, like they want everything perfect. So they're spending a lot of money. And the bigger the city, the more they're spending, right? But yeah, it's the cost of ownership is really never taken into account when people are, looking at numbers. I just posted again something else. I always refer to my ex because, it's easy to go to source. There was this townhouse in Niagara Falls where I'm from. And of course, there was another one for sale right next door. So you could rent this townhome for, $2,400 a month, which was overpriced in my opinion. But regardless, you could probably negotiate on it a bit. So less than $2,400 a month to rent it with zero down, zero maintenance. The appliances are included and everything else. And to buy that same townhouse, it's like $4,000 a month. And that doesn't include your maintenance. It doesn't include, you have to put down $100,000. You used to put down $20,000 on a house. Like not that long ago, you could buy a house in the region with 20 grand down, and now it's 100,000 or 50,000, and you're paying all this, mortgage insurance. When we came here in 1989. The interest rates were 12.5%. I just literally looked at my dad's statement because I was cleaning up a bunch of his stuff. His interest and principal was $495 a month with, again, 12.5% interest rate. And, he was making like 40, 50 grand a year. Like it's not like the incomes have like doubled and tripled. $495 a month. Again, 1989. But if you move forward to when I bought my house, it was in 2005. Now the interest rate was lower, but it was still 4.5% or something. And I was paying $707, including the property tax. So $500, and then 14 or 16 years later, it went up by a couple $100 with the property tax included, and I think his included property tax. And now you come to today, and I always say this to people: why would anyone buy right now unless you had a bunch of cash and you've already been in the market? Why would you buy when you can go rent a place for almost half? When you take into consideration the maintenance and the improvements you're going to make on owning a house, and forget about the down payment. When you take into consideration, you can rent for almost half of what it would cost you to buy, and knowing that prices are declining. We can debate on whether they're going to decline or not, but the trend right now is declining, right? The house prices are declining. We're in this downward trend. So you can't really dispute. If you say which way the market's going, if someone tells you it's going up, they're lying, because the market is not going up, going down. The one thing that really opened my eyes in the last week is the people in, I forget where they're, Guelph. I think they were in Guelph. They were on the news. They lost $140,000 on their down payment.
I saw that.
And they were happy.
I could not.
People are losing $140,000 cash. First-time buyers. These are not speculators. These are first-time buyers, like young millennials trying to start their lives, and they lose $140,000. Like it's like the worst nightmare you could ever believe. And what do they say? We're relieved.
Somebody sent that me, John, and I couldn't believe that. I was like, are they paid actors? Like, what is going on here? Because who on earth loses that kind of money? I mean, it doesn't matter how rich you are, that's still a substantial amount of money. Even if you're earning millions, that's still a lot of money. And to just lose it just like that and say, oh yeah, I'm happy about it, that was the weirdest thing I'd seen.
They were just average people. I don't think they were any high income earners or anything like that. Just average people. And now they're literally like living in Hamilton, like renting a room from a friend. And they're happy that they lost this money, like just because it was such a relief because of the BS they had to deal with, and the house price declines and whatever else they had to deal with. And I'm just like that's a lot of, like, people are treating hundreds of thousands of dollars like it's like they're $100 bills now. Like, oh, I just lost $100 bill, and it's like 140 grand. That's like more money than most people will ever have.
Yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous. And I got the couple on the screen right there who lost the money, and I don't get it. I mean, that kind of shows you the absolute insanity that we're in right now when it comes to this real estate market. I've seen you post this as well. I posted this a bunch of times, and it's basically the chart that shows you the bubble chart. Like, you've got the greed, delusion, new paradigm, denial, and you've talked about the denial, how people are denying the price. They're saying, oh, we'll wait to the spring will be good, like the spring this year. Even though, I mean, the spring this year wasn't good when you think about most of the price gains were erased in the space of like a couple of months after. It's absolutely insane.
The spring this year, it caught me by surprise because, we're in this trend. We literally just lost hundreds of thousands of dollars in real estate values from the Bank of Canada, raising 25 basis points. And again, it was those first drops in 2022 were nothing to do with affordability. It was literally just speculative drops from people saying, oh boy, the party's over, and running for the hills. And now you have, and now we are where we are. And so this spring came, I'm like, it's over, whatever. And all of a sudden they paused. Again, speculative times, rates hadn't done their job yet, just from talking about it. And this is where now people are just in this position again. They're already talking, oh, they're going to start dropping rates. And they think that once they start dropping rates, we're off to the races. But again, those rates hadn't even taken effect. It's hard to talk about what people are going to do and how sensible people act, because the market does not act sensible. The market is reactive to speculative announcements, and it's not rational, right? But I think that, again, now that the effects are starting to come into effect, we're going to see what's going to happen with the spring. And I think that this winter is going to be slow. Every winter's slow, but the spring next year, one of two things are going to happen. It's going to the Bank of Canada might get scared and cut the rates, or do a little cut or something, and people are going to take that signal. But they can't do this. I keep running the scenario through my head. The Bank of
Yeah.
Canada, they know at this point we can't let up. We can't pretend that we're going to start cutting rates back to, because they see what's going to happen. They're in a tough position, but it was created by them, so I'm glad they're in the tough position. They got to do they got to do the right thing, and the right thing when it comes to inflation, if you look at the charts of inflationary times, they're always like, majority of the time, they're like these double peaks, right? And you've talked about it many times, where they, and this is what's going to happen if they cut too early. And if, people are already ready, they're like, we're ready for the first sign of a rate cut, and we're going on a shopping spree. And, and they're like, this is like public. And, but I just think that it's a really tough position they're in, and hopefully they don't get too scared. Now, the other problem is the kicking the can down the road, which they're continuing to do. We got Freeland coming out last week, telling us that, she's pretty much ordering the banks to take it easy on homeowners, which I understand, somewhat, but which homeowners? Take it easy on the speculators, because the majority of these purchases were speculators. Take it easy on the speculators when they come up for renewal. Like, they make it seem like they're talking about families only, but they're not. They're talking about everybody. And of course, now we're seeing mortgage arrears. So mortgage arrears are rising. They're started their upward trajectory, I feel, at this point. And this is all with kicking the can down the road, trying not to make this happen. This is what they're actively avoiding, but it's happening anyway. Which, again, with those mortgage arrears, you can add, more numbers on top in reality, because they've done all these things to prevent it, and it's still going to happen. So I just think that it's such a shit show, as you know, right?
Yeah, it really is. And even with what Freeland came out and said, it was interesting, because I had a conversation with my good buddy Scott Walters, who's a realtor in California, the other day, and he was telling me about, in 2008, how they came out with this Obama-backed loan modification program, right? So this came out in 2008, and basically it allowed people who were in these dodgy mortgages to refinance into a mortgage with a lower payment if they could prove that they were falling on hard times, like somebody had lost a job or something like that. But did it stop anything, John? No. It didn't stop anything. So, they come out with these plans and problems, but once the cat's out the bag and once the bubble begins to burst, and I truly believe it is, because, the price decline that we saw, as you said, off that 25 basis point hike, it was not interest rates. The mainstream media was blowing it up at that time, as saying, oh, it's all interest rates, that's why prices are going down. Well, how did prices go up in the spring then, when rates were even higher than that? So there's no logic to this market, and I think the government, a lot of realtors on YouTube, the mainstream media, they all try and circle around this narrative that, oh, there's some kind of logic to the market. Like, I see it in the stock market all the time. It's like, oh, the Dow's up today, this is why. When it has nothing to do with that. It's just that people like a narrative, and humans, we like a story. And I just always find that hilarious. But as you said, the market's irrational, and it's irrational because we're in a bubble. So there is kind of a certain component to it where you're like, all bets are off. I don't know what's going to happen, because when people are this crazy, you don't know what's going to happen. I mean, we were truly in that mania. One of the reasons why I thought, this is definitely the top right now, is because everybody was saying, prices are just going up from here. That's it. Like, prices only go up in Canada. We had this pandemic that happened. Prices went up during that. And then when I saw that, I was like, man, everybody is just getting into this hysteria about prices are just going to go up forever. And even Calgary, is an interesting market, right? Because it's still going up. It's kind of flattened out a little bit now, but a lot of people have been moving here. It's like people late to the party. Almost the dumb money is coming from like Ontario and BC late to the party because they thought, oh, Calgary's the only place that didn't get really inflated during 2020 and 2021. So that must mean it's going to be good. And I tweeted this out, but when I took the Uber to the airport the other day, I didn't even bring this up in conversation. And this guy was literally like, do you rent or do you own your home? And I was like, we rent. And he was like, oh, you should buy. And this is like a guy who's been in the country 8 months, he was telling me. He was from Africa. And he's somehow buying a home. And I'm like, how's this guy buying a home? And he's telling me to buy a home. And I'm like, this is just such a mess right now. I don't know how much fraud is going on in the market. I mean, maybe it's not fraud. Maybe that was all legitimate on his end. But that is the end of part 1. Part 2 will be released shortly. If you've enjoyed this video, please support the channel either on Patreon or by going to expressvpn.com/marketmania and getting yourself a VPN to get around Bill C-11 and all the censorship laws in Canada. If you've enjoyed this video, you might like this video here. You might like this playlist that I picked out for you here. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.